Hello, Morning Star. This is Reverend Cherie Jones, and I'm so glad to be with you today on this thankful Thursday. How many of you are thankful today? How many of you have an attitude of gratitude because God has done something magnificent in your life? If that applies to you, why don't you put it in the comments? You can put a heart symbol, a thumbs up. You can put a fire sign. You can just tell us and give us your testimony of what you are thankful for today, because God is still in the blessing business. And there is a word from the Lord today. It will be coming from our scripture reading will be coming from Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. And it reads, "This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." For a few moments, I want to preach from the subject, Never Alone. Morningstar, I love this text. I absolutely love the story of Joshua because Joshua is the young protege of Moses. He followed behind Moses and is now called on to fill Moses' shoes. Moses has died, and now the responsibility of leading the children of Israel into the promised land, it now rests on Joshua's shoulders. Can you imagine being in his shoes, being in Joshua's shoes, having to follow behind such a dynamic person as Moses, the one who performed so many miracles, the one whom God called to lead the children and help deliver them from Egyptian bondage? And now Joshua has to finish the work by leading the Israelites into Canaan, which is known as the Promised Land. I love this text because God repeats God's self so much in this text. And anytime we see something repeated in the scriptures, that means we should pay close attention to it. And in this text, we see God says repeatedly, "Be strong and courageous." God is telling Joshua that he needs him to be strong. He needs Joshua to be courageous, intimating to us that clearly Joshua must be afraid. Joshua must feel weakened by the very weight of responsibility that is weighing on his shoulders. And God constantly reminds Joshua. God constantly affirms Joshua. God constantly encourages Joshua to be strong and courageous. But not only does God say be strong and courageous, he tells Joshua, "I will be with you wherever you go. I will never leave you nor forsake you." God gives this covenantal promise to Joshua. He will never be left alone. And when I read that text, it gives me assurance. And I don't know about you, but it encourages me. It affirms me because I feel that God is saying the same thing to me too, that no matter what circumstance I find myself in, God is with me in it. And I reflect on my time in the Sahara Desert. I had the opportunity to travel to Africa a few months back, and I got to go to Morocco and travel into the Sahara Desert. And it was a life-changing experience, to say the least. One of the most memorable experiences I had was while in the Sahara Desert, we got to ride on camels and we got to ride on ATVs. And I was super excited about both getting on the camel and riding the ATV because I already know that I am so strong and courageous. I'm able to conquer anything I set my mind to. And these were two things I had never done before. And I was excited to rise to the challenge of doing these things that would be a new experience for me. The camel ride went fine. It went well. A little hitch in the beginning. I had to change my camel, but that's for another day. But then we got to do the ATVs. And I was excited because I just was ready to rev the engine and race through the sand dunes and be on the ATVs. And so while riding, I discovered that I actually wasn't that great at it. I was having a hard time steering the ATV. And we are riding through the desert on these sand dunes, some high, some low, and we're just making sharp turns and I was struggling. And at one point, as I was driving and we were making a sharp turn, I realized that I could not complete the turn. And I was going to drive down into a ditch or a sand dune. I'm not really sure what the desert terminology is for what I did, but I drove down into a ditch-like situation. And I braced myself for it because I had convinced myself, I had promised myself I was not going to fall off the ATV. And I didn't. But I found myself down in the ditch. And I'm looking up and I'm seeing everybody on their ATVs riding past me. And I got ready to rev the engine and go back up. And the guide came over. He called out to me, he said, "Wait." And he came and he drove me up out of the ditch. Now, the guide had to be about 18 years old. And I had to sit in the back seat of this ATV and hug this young boy as he drove me up out of the ditch. And I had this sense of fear because I realized like, oh, wow, I really was incapable of getting myself out of this situation. But as we drove through the sand dunes, I heard God speak to me and really told me that there will be some situations where I will be fearful, where I will feel like I am incapable. But in those situations, he will send help. But most importantly, that in any of those situations that he will be with me. And that gave me assurance, very much like Joshua, I believe, who God gave him assurance that, yes, this situation, you have been called to be a leader of a nation. And this is a big responsibility. Yes, you are scared. Yes, you feel like you are not enough, that you are unqualified for the position, but I've called you. I will equip you. And most importantly, I will be with you. And so as I was on the back seat of the ATV, at one point we got to a crossroads, and it was a part of the sand dune where people had a choice. They could choose the trail to the left or choose the trail to the right. And you could see that one trail was a bit more difficult than the other. In fact, the one to the left only had one set of tracks because that meant that most people were not going to go that way because it was too difficult. Only those more experienced ATV riders chose that path. All the others were going to the right, and you could see there were multiple tread marks in the sand. And while we sat there for a moment, I looked at these tread marks in the sand, and I began to ponder for myself, what does this mean? Because I really felt like we were sitting there for a while, and I still don't know why the guide stopped there. But I sat and I looked at these treads in the sand, and I heard God say to me that I'm going to take you some places. And it may be difficult. The terrain may be hard. The road may get rough. But I give you a choice. Whether you choose to go the more difficult route or the easier route, I will be with you. And I will send help to take you there. And that gave me such an assurance that no matter what my circumstance, no matter what I am in, God is with me. And I believe God is saying the same thing to you today. Don't be afraid. Be strong and courageous. You may feel in your heart that God is calling you to do something that's so amazing, so out of the box, so different, so beyond your imagination. And you feel like you are ill-equipped to do it. You are afraid that you will be out there alone and no one will be there to help you. But I've come today to tell you that God is with you. God will send help for you. And so be strong and courageous. Rest in that promise that God gives, that wherever you go, God will be with you also. God bless you, Morning Star.